Welcome back to another episode of the series. If you missed the first episode, I'll do a quick recap of what we're trying to accomplish. I missed a lot of games when I was younger for one reason or another, be it financially or because I was sucked into multiplayer games like crazy. I missed a lot of the titles that people would consider essential titles. So the point of this series is to go back and play a lot of the stuff that I never played. Now that I'm in my late 20s, I have kids of my own. And so I'm not interested in multiplayer gaming anymore. I almost solely play games that are single player and with stories, and I almost always play to the credits. So I want to go back. I'm going to play things I missed that interest me and things I didn't know would interest me until I played them. So without further ado, let's get into Slaying the Backlog. This episode's going to be different from the first episode. I'm going to try to improve as we go until we come up with a format that we really love. So I've introduced a phase camera for this episode, which I'm hoping will decrease my editing time, so I don't have to find footage for every single second of this video. I'm also going to talk about the game differently than I did with Dragon's Dogma, so I'm going to talk about it like you already have played it. Instead of explaining every single aspect of the game, I'm going to spend more time talking about my opinions of those aspects. I'm hoping this will make a more interesting viewing experience and maybe give us something more to talk about. Right ahead of the actual product here, I just want to mention that I'm still recording via Twitch, and then I'm taking that Twitch footage and I'm downloading it to my computer and then editing the video from there. So I apologize if the quality is not perfect. In this particular video, the last section of the game got struck down on Twitch, so the audio is all messed up, so I just won't be able to use that audio at all. I will get a capture card eventually. It's just not, we're just not there yet. So I didn't think it was too bad for Dragon's Dogma. With Metal Gear Solid, I don't think it'll affect the game at all. It's a PS1 game. But that's everything. That's the inside baseball. We're done with that. Let's get into the video. A little history about me and Metal Gear Solid. So I played Metal Gear Solid 5 just a little bit. I got 2 or 3 missions into that game. And I played the multiplayer mode that existed in Metal Gear Solid 5 with my cousin quite a bit when I was fresh out of high school. I think that game came out in like 2015, I think. As tradition will dictate with this series, here's what I think I know about Metal Gear Solid before playing it, so I'm going to read specifically off the script that I wrote prior to starting the game. I know it's a spiritual successor, or maybe a sequel to the Metal Gear Super Nintendo game. I guess what I know is it's connected somehow to those games. I also know that people consider Kojima to be a genius when it comes to game development. I know the games are based on stealth gameplay, and that the first game is a PS1 game. Knowing this, I'm not expecting too much in terms of gameplay or cutscenes. Historically, I've always been bad at stealth games. Though it's always been a genre I respected, I'm hoping that Metal Gear Solid being so old won't hinder my enjoyment of what many consider to be a classic. I'm going to be playing the recent re-release version, however, so hopefully they've made improvements on gameplay to help me out. That's really it though, I suppose. I know people think Kojima's a genius, I know it's a stealth game, and I know one of the Metal Gear Solid games has something to do with the memory card slots, but I'm not sure how that will translate to modern consoles or which game has this. I also know one of the old games has an old man where if you wait long enough, he dies of a heart attack or something. I saw a YouTube video on these things a few years ago. I want to say the third Metal Gear game is the one with the guy with the heart attack, but I could be wrong. I'm going to launch into this game now, and the me from the future will have to handle the rest of the script. Metal Gear Solid immediately impressed me. For a little bit of history, my experience with PS1 games is basically just Final Fantasy VII, which I played early last year. Metal Gear Solid starts off with a cutscene, it has voice acting. I didn't know that games on PS1 could have these things. Metal Gear also does that funny thing that old games do, where the characters in the game talk to your character, but they tell you specific buttons to press, like the select button or whatever. This used to annoy me when I was a kid playing games on the PlayStation 2, but in modern sense looking back, I don't know if it's nostalgia or whatever, but I really found that charming. Gameplay and level design. The majority of Metal Gear gameplay involves sneaking through areas and picking up items, and then at the end of that area, there's usually a boss fight for you to encounter. The sneaking consists of watching the radar on the top right of the screen, and then trying to get around enemies without them seeing them. But certain materials that you walk on will also affect your ability to sneak. For example, in the first area of the game, there was a puddle. And when I stepped in the puddle, the enemy around the corner heard it and came to investigate. This kind of blew my mind for a PS1 game because I'm pretty sure the AI is more advanced than Redfall. And like, how does that happen? There's another funny moment early on in the game where Snake is in a comm call and he mentions having cigarettes that he snuck onto the mission.
Remember, except for your binoculars, you're naked. You need to arm yourself with whatever weapons you can find.
I remember. First I'm strip searched by Dr. Naomi here, and then all my weapons are taken away. Imagine yourself put in that position.
Well, if you make it back in one piece, maybe I'll let you do a strip search on me.
I'll hold you to that, Doctor. By the way, sorry to disappoint you, but I did manage to smuggle out my smokes.
How did you do that?
In my stomach. Thanks to the shot you gave me that suppressed my stomach acids.
Cigarettes? How are those going to help you?
You never know.
When I first heard this, I thought it was just a funny detail from the 90s. You know, it's not something you would see in modern gaming, cigarettes being mentioned at all. But then a little while later, there's a section where you have to sneak through some lasers. And the cigarettes go from a funny detail of the 90s to being an actual game mechanic. It took me a little while to figure out exactly that the lasers were going up and down and not front to back. But that aside, I thought it was pretty cool to use cigarettes as a gameplay mechanic. Overall, the level design of Metal Gear Solid is set up like a Metroidvania. You go through areas, and towards the end of areas, you get key cards, and the key cards, you'll get higher level key cards as you go. And so then you can backtrack to those areas, or in certain parts of the game, you have to backtrack to get other items that you would have missed first time through, not having the correct level of key card. So on the topic of level design, I think I'll just go through each area of the game, and I'll just kind of give my impressions of each of the areas. The docks are the first area of the game, and they're a very small area. They do a good job of introducing you to the enemy cone of vision concept and your ability to sneak around. But this is the area that had that puddle of water I talked about earlier. The goal of that area is to take the elevator, and I think it serves as a good introduction to what Metal Gear Solid is all about. It then takes you to the heliport, which extends your introduction to the mechanics by introducing cameras that you have to sneak around, or spotlights. Then you sneak through a vent to get to the next area. You have a small choice here whether to sneak through the second floor or the first floor vent. I chose the vent on the first floor. Tank hangar. The tank hangar is what I would consider the first real area of the game. There are two levels to the first floor. There's the base level, and then the catwalk that goes around the top, which I assume if you snuck through the top, that's where you would be. There's also an elevator that takes you to two different basement levels. The first basement level really only serves to introduce you to the DARPA chief and to Meryl. The second basement level is really where the good stuff is. It's the armory, so there are weapons and explosives, and you get to blow a hole in the wall to reach the first boss fight in Ocelot. There's also a couple of trapdoors in the first floor. They never got me, but they made sure that you continue to move with purpose when you're in this section. Overall, I think the tank hangar is a fine first section of the game. You get to do some sneaking, and you get some upgrades. And moving into the next section brings you to the canyon. The canyon was sort of annoying for me. Apparently there was a mine detector I could have gotten in the first section, which could have helped me here. There were a few times in this game that I had to pull up a guide to figure out how to finish things. When I pulled up the guide for this section, it informed me that if I crawl, I could automatically pick up the claymores that were placed. I crawled my way through the canyon to the boss fight with the tank. There's not a lot to this area. It's really just a big open field and a boss fight with the tank. Nuclear warhead storage building. This section was really cool to me. The first floor is full of guards and nuclear warheads, so you're not allowed to use your guns at all. If you're seen by the enemies in this area, they flood the area with gas, and if you're not fast enough, you die. This area also has two basement floors, making it similar to tank hangar, but more complicated. I like this area a lot. There was one time where I was caught in the main floor and ended up hiding in the back of a truck and surviving. There was another time though where I had a guy come up the bottom floor and I was taking the stairs up to the elevator, and there was a guy there too, so I laid on the stairs hoping not to get caught by the guy above me, but also hoping that the guy below me did not see me, and it worked. And then I realized I could climb the stairs backwards while crawling on my belly, which made me laugh pretty hard. It's not a problem. It was a good moment. The two basement floors serve their own purposes. One has the hallways that are filled with gas, where you have to use the remote-controlled missiles and go around the corner and then shoot the power box so the electric floor is deactivated. This was cool to do, but it took me some time to get the hang of controlling the remote-controlled missile and also going fast enough to shoot the thing before I died. Then off the one side of that floor is where you have the cyborg ninja fight and you meet Otacon. That scene is cool because Otacon pees himself, which I found to be a pretty realistic response to the things going on, and I appreciated its inclusion. The other basement floor has some guards, and it leads to the commander's office, which is just the area for the Psycho Mantis boss fight. The floor with the commander's office has another one of my favorite Metal Gear Solid moments. There's a bathroom, on this floor with a guard in it who you can sneak around. But there's also a women's restroom on the other side, which you have to knock on to get the attention of Meryl and finally meet up with her. I just think it's a cool design piece to have bathrooms and make the place feel like actual places where people work. Caves and underground passage. After the Psycho Mantis fight, you enter the caves area with the wolves. There's not really a lot here, and it's not worth fighting the wolves. It's really just better to run through the section and grab what few items you see on the way. Underground passage's only real purpose is for the fight with Sniper Wolf, which requires you to go back to the tank hangar and get the sniper. Not a lot to say about that area either. It's just a hallway, and it serves for a boss fight, really. Torture room and communications tower. There's not a lot to say about the torture room section because it's really just getting you to the communications tower, which is the section that sucks. The shooting in Metal Gear is not good, and the communications tower has you run up a tower and fight enemies the whole way up, which is kind of awful. Once you're at the top of the communications tower, it's a boss arena fight for the Liquid Snake helicopter fight. There's a cool section where you have to rappel down before that, which is cool in its idea, but not so much in practice. There's like air vents shooting out at you and things. Snowfield. Another wide open area that reminds me a lot of the canyon. This is the arena for your final fight with Sniper Wolf. There are a few buildings you can go in and get some good items out of, however. I don't mind this area too much. Throw some chaff grenades, get yourself some loot before you move on. It's lower on the list, but it's not as bad as Canyon, which has no real purpose other than a boss fight. Blast Furnace. This area was really cool aesthetically. It looked a lot different than a lot of the areas we've seen so far. It's got a section where you have to hug a wall and go under a crane and then walk across to the next section. I died a few times before I realized I just had to use my D-pad instead of using my analog stick. Every time I tried to get the item on the left side and then head back to the right using my analog stick, I would fall off. It's not a bad area in practice. There just isn't too much going on here. I think there are only like 3 guards in the entire area. And then there's 2 separate elevators to run down to the freezer section, which serves as your arena for the Vulcan Raven fight. Metal Gear Hangar. After the Vulcan Raven fight, I think there are 2 hallways that lead to the Metal Gear Hangar. The one hallway has a bunch of turrets set up that I saw them on the radar, I stopped to throw a chaff grenade, and then I fell into a trapdoor. So, congratulations, Kojima. You finally got me, man. The actual hangar has some water and some ladders that climb on top of and then across the Metal Gear itself. Then you take a ladder back down and then around a catwalk to a computer room where you're introduced to what's going on with the PAL key. I mentioned how characters talk to Snake about like what buttons to press, and they specifically mentioned the buttons. There's a moment early on, right after the Revolver Ocelot fight, I believe, where they talk about looking on the back of the CD case. And I spent a little bit of time like looking through my items and realizing I had no CD case, and that's when it hit me. See, hearing about the memory slot thing or whatever, which actually isn't memory slot, but hearing about that and hearing about the crazy stuff Kojima does, I was like, okay. So I got up and I walked into the other room. I take out my Xbox One case and I flip it to the back, and lo and behold, there it is. The number for Meryl. I can see how that section would be mind-blowing when the PS1 came out, but I also think about how many people, rented the game or picked the game up from someone or borrowed the game from a friend or whatever. How many people didn't have the case and then didn't know the number to call Meryl? Like, that had to be pretty frustrating. And like back then, you didn't have the internet, so what did you just call your friend up on the landline? Hello? What's the back of the case say, buddy? You only gave me the disc. And like also, I had friends who would just like pitch their cases and keep their disc in one of those disc things. So if you did that, you were screwed. Guns, in my opinion, in Metal Gear Solid are really only for the boss fights. If you get caught by an enemy, you can't shoot your way out of that situation. No matter how much you shoot the enemies, they just keep coming and coming and coming. So you really have to run and hide. Metal Gear Solid is a stealth game. Metal Gear Solid is not a combat game, and that's fine. I just thought it was important to mention. And also, like I said, the shooting mechanic is terrible. It's got those old school like tank controls that the old Resident Evils had. I did not like it. Metal Gear Solid's not easy. I died like a lot. According to my end game screen, I continued a total of 69 times. Now, I don't know if that counts every time you load the game or only when you die and you hit continue. But if it does, I'm willing to bet that's probably pretty accurate. Another core gameplay mechanic of Metal Gear Solid is the boss fights. Every boss in the game killed me at least once. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to list all the bosses. I'm going to give my opinions on them. Revolver, Ocelot. This boss fight wasn't that bad. It involves him running around and then shooting around corners and trying to hit you, and then you running around and chasing him and trying to shoot him. This boss fight has the same problem I have with Metal Gear Solid as a whole, which is the shooting is terrible. If it was remade with modern shooting, it'd be great. I know it's a PS1 game, and I powered through it, and I'm not complaining about it that much because it's like a small complaint. On otherwise, like the game's great, and that's the small complaint I have. Overall, though, it's a small boss arena. You run around, Revolver Ocelot, you shoot him. You can't go in the middle of the arena because that's where the president or whatever, what is his name? The president of Arms Tech or whatever. You can't go in the middle of the arena because the president of Arms Tech is set up there with like bombs or whatever, so you can't go in there. But you just run around the outside of this square and you shoot Ocelot. It's a good boss. I just wish the aiming was better. Tank. I mentioned the canyon being a pain because I had to crawl across it, but once I got up to the tank, you just throw grenades at him, and it really wasn't that bad of a boss fight. Shooting him doesn't do anything. You kind of just run in circles around the tank, and you toss grenades until the fight's over. You don't have to use a gun. You don't have to worry about aiming. You just toss in grenades and running in circles trying not to die. All in all, it's a fine fight. The arena is the canyon, which is just a giant open area. Fighting a tank, I guess, is pretty cool. One man taking down a tank. Cyborg Ninja. I spent a few tries attempting to use chaff grenades and then shooting the ninja when he was stunned. Because otherwise, if you try to shoot him, he just dodges or blocks everything with his sword. This absolutely does not work. You don't have enough chaff grenades, you don't do enough damage. This was another instance where I had to consult the guide. So I looked it up, and that's when I found out that you just use fisticuffs to win the fight. The arena's in an office setting, lots of places for you to walk around and dodge the cyborg ninja, and he'll do flips and do all kinds of cool stuff. I like this boss fight a lot. He's a cool boss. The mechanics aren't that bad, you're just punching. It's definitely one of my top fights in the game. And I like Cyborg Ninja and the reveal about him later, but we'll save that for the story section. Psycho Mantis. This fight was the first time that I wish I had played on the original PlayStation. There's a weird section for my playthrough where he mentions your memory, and mine was blank. But if you play on the original PlayStation, he'll actually name off games that you have on your memory card. I bet this would have been crazy back in the day. I looked up a clip and watched somebody who it mentions him playing Suikoden and all kinds of things. That would have been super cool. If I had played that back on the PlayStation 1, I bet my mind would have been blown. Also, the thing I put in my before I played write-up wasn't the memory card that you had to switch the slots of, or the thing I put before. Also, the thing I put in the before I played write-up, I got that wrong. It wasn't the memory card, it was the controller ports. I mean, I saw a video how many years ago, so either way, Campbell tells you what to do. And then I had to look up how to do it on modern consoles, and then we got it done. So, if anyone out there is playing the remake and doesn't know, you hit the left bumper, right bumper, it pulls up the menu, and then you can switch your controller port. The fight itself is fairly straightforward, though. It continues the trend of aiming in this game's trash, and I don't like doing it, but it gets passed because it's PlayStation 1. And in this fight, specifically this case, it's got this unique and cool thing that I don't think a game has ever done. Especially at the time, but even to this day, I don't think I've seen another game do anything like that. Psycho Mantis is cool. Sniper Wolf. This fight requires backtracking to get the sniper, but then the fight itself is pretty simple. You lay down, you find her in your scope, keep your scope on her, and then you shoot her before she shoots you. The arena is just a really long hallway. It's really not that interesting. This is, however, where I figured out that if you're aiming a sniper, or the Stinger, or even the remote control rocket, they're much easier if you use the D-pad than they are with the analog stick. This was a useful thing to learn, but the sniper wolf fight, not that interesting. The helicopter. This fight's pretty cool. You're on a rooftop, and he's in a helicopter shooting at you, flying around the tower you're on. You use the stinger to lock on and shoot him. I used what I learned about the D-pad and aiming to make this whole fight a lot easier for myself. It took me a few tries to figure out how the second phase of the fight works, where he dips below the building and then pops up. But all in all though, I would say it's one of the coolest boss fights in the game. I don't feel like at any point I got dicked over by aiming. The whole thing seems to be about positioning and then knowing when to take your shots and when to run. It feels a lot like a Dark Souls fight. If you died, it's probably because you were greedy and going for damage instead of waiting for a better shot and hiding. And the whole thing's purely skill-based to me, so that makes it a pretty great fight. Sniper Wolf. Again. Look, we just did this. You find her on the scope, you don't lose her. You shoot her before she shoots you. On my first attempt, I lost her behind a hill, and I got killed before I could re-find her. On my second attempt, I never let her out of my sight, and I took her out. It's not exactly hard. You use the D-pad, you have a better time at aiming, and then you kind of just lay there and snipe. She hides behind trees, and the arena's wide open instead of a narrow hallway, so this fight better than the first Sniper Wolf fight, but it's still one of the least interesting in the game. Vulcan Raven. This was the dude who was in the tank. His boss fight's interesting in its own right. You're in a freezer area, and there's containers all around, and you have to run from him, and then try to hit him down long aisles, or you use your Nikita missiles to try to hit him around corners. It's not a bad fight, and if I'm remembering correctly, I got through by the skin of my teeth. And took him out with a claymore after my health was super low. It took me a few tries, like most other boss fights, and he's a cool character. Big machine guns are always awesome. The arena serves its purpose of giving you places to duck around and behind. And you can easily bait him into claymores by getting his attention and then running away because he'll sort of chase after you based on where he saw you last. After halfway through the fight, he starts knocking over containers, which gives you items to pick up like rations. But it also blocks off some of your getaway paths, which is smart game design, and adds another layer to this fight. Metal Gear Rex. I've never been a mech guy. Metal Gear Solid may be the first game where I went, okay, I get it. Mechs are pretty cool. This fight's sick. If you call Otacon, he'll tell you the weakness of the old Rexy boy, and then it's just a matter of execution after that. The fight took me a lot of tries, but once I got it down, it felt so cool. Basically, once you recognize the pattern of his attacks, you could dodge them, and then get multiple hits in before running away from the missiles he launches in certain instances. I think on my actual final fight with Rexy, I had half health and a ration left. Learning the moves of a giant enemy, and then executing your personal strategy, felt a lot like a From Software fight to me, and I loved it. Halfway through that fight, you get visited by old cyborg ninja Gray Fox again, and my first time I thought, oh man, this guy's gonna fight me? My health's low, I gotta deal with this, and a giant mech. But then he actually helps you take the mech out, and then it initiates the second phase of the fight, which is a lot like the first phase, but you're aiming for the cockpit instead of the thing off the shoulder. Still, I love Metal Gear Rex. That fight's great, and it's a really cool enemy, really cool design. Liquid Snake Fisticuffs fight. Look, if Metal Gear Rex was the end of the game, that would have been good with me. From a story perspective, I don't mind where we went after that, but from a gameplay perspective, I could have done without the fisticuffs on top of the Metal Gear. Aesthetically, it's super cool, but I don't feel like I needed to play it. I would have been much happier with a cutscene personally. I already did a fisticuffs fight earlier in the game, and I think that fight was way more interesting than this one. And the arena is so small, and it's just not that interesting in gameplay. That being said, it's much better than what comes next. Calling this one Liquid Just Don't Die. Look, the game had me hook, line, and sinker. I thought we were done at this point. We'd run away, we'd call it a day. And then Kojima said, why don't we knock him down one more time by making him deal with this crappy gun control. What annoys me most is the whole time I was doing the runaway in the Jeep and using the gun turret thing, I was thinking, man, this was probably really cool back on PS1. If you're someone who is used to playing games with this control style, you probably felt like you were watching a movie, but playing it in game form. Unfortunately, this section didn't really work for me, and maybe if it didn't take me 3 tries, because I didn't realize there was a second ration I could have grabbed in the parking lot area, then I could have probably did it on my first or second try, and I would have been less annoyed. But either way, it stands as my least favorite part of the entire game. The story of Metal Gear is pretty dang good. especially for being a voice-acted PlayStation 1 game. I could have seen them using a lot less dialogue because of the cost of voice acting. Very early on in the story, you get a hint that things aren't exactly what you think they are. You're sent into this facility on a remote island in Alaska to try to stop this group called FOXHOUND who have taken over the facility to gain access to the nuclear weapons and also the Metal Gear. And they're threatening to launch a nuke on the United States if they're not given this guy named Big Boss's DNA. You meet the Darby-Chief, but he dies mysteriously of a heart attack after he tells you that Psycho Mantis got his launch code. Then when you meet the ArmSec president, he tells you that there's no possible way the Darby-Chief could be infiltrated by Psycho Mantis. So you don't really know what to believe right off the bat. There's a lot of things that contradict themselves, and it just doesn't feel right. And I personally was on the train of Campbell's up to no good. I don't trust him. You meet Meryl early on, who turns out to be Campbell's niece. Snake really takes a liking to her very quickly. After she gets shot by Sniper Wolf, you get captured, and you have the option of enduring torture in order for her to be the one who lives at the end of the game. I didn't realize how serious this part was, so when I played through, I messed it up, and I got the ending with Otacon. I'm not willing to play through the entire game again, so I looked up the Meryl ending, and the Meryl romance thing is a lot like a lot of video game romance for me, where it just kind of falls a little bit flat, but the Otacon ending, on the other hand, two bros, I was laughing a little bit at the dialogue. I can't show it because my audio got messed up, but it's definitely got meme potential. I like that ending. One of the early reveals is that there's a character that Snake refers to as Master. He starts contacting Snake and giving Snake information and helping out. He puts doubt in Snake's mind about Campbell and Naomi, and generally he's spot on about them not giving Snake all the information. And you learn to trust Master, but unfortunately you shouldn't, because he actually turns out to be Liquid Snake in disguise. The information he did give you wasn't exactly wrong, though, was it? I mean, people weren't telling you everything. The first person you're told is bad on the good guy side of the board is Naomi. It's revealed that she's not who she says she is, and that she stole the identity to get put on the mission to arm Foxdie with the information to kill Solid Snake as well as all the Foxhound members. She wanted revenge for what happened between Solid Snake and Gray Fox, who she considers her brother. Foxdie is also the explanation for why people keep mysteriously dying. The government allowed use of a genetic weapon that could target specific people's genetic codes, and they injected Solid Snake with it to infect the Foxhound members as he went through the facility. This was all to ensure that no members of Foxhound would make it out alive, as well as ensuring that they could retrieve Metal Gear Rex with no problems. In the final fight with Metal Gear Rex, you get more information on Gray Fox and Naomi. It's revealed by Gray Fox that he took out Naomi's parents, and he couldn't bring himself to take out Naomi as he was young and inexperienced. He tells Snake to tell Naomi everything, and then distracts Liquid Snake so that Snake can take him out. Unfortunately, Snake can't bring himself to take out Gray Fox, so you end up having to fight Metal Gear Rex some more anyway. After the chase scene, which we won't talk about again, you're pinned under a Jeep, either you and Meryl or you and Otacon, and then Liquid Snake's going to take you out because that guy just never dies. And then a miracle happens, and the Foxdie virus kills him before he's able to kill you and Meryl or you and Otacon. At the end of the game, it's revealed that the Secretary of Defense is behind everything, and even though he was willing to send a nuke into the facility to cover everything up, Campbell pulls through as the real MVP, gets a hold of the president, and the president is not willing to nuke to cover anything up. He's more willing to just let the Secretary of Defense take the fall. Then in my ending, at least, Campbell reveals that Meryl was actually his daughter, and Snake and Campbell share a moment with that. You get some exposition from Naomi about how you should carry on and live your own life, and that while Snake will die at some point from Foxdie, he should carry on living until then, and not for the past and not for what the future could be, but for him right now. I think that's the general theme of the game, is to not worry about heritage or your genetics or your past, and worry about who you are as a person. I like the ending a lot. The Meryl ending clearly has the more emotional storyline. The Otacon ending is much more of a meme, which is fun. Both endings are good, and Metal Gear as a whole was really impressive from a story perspective. I like a good espionage story where you don't know who's on your side the whole time, and Metal Gear Solid does a great job of that overall. There's a lot of mention, though, of characters from the past or things that happened in the past, and I don't know if those are from the Metal Gear games or if that's something that happens in different Metal Gear Solid game that's a prequel that comes later. There's a lot of talk of Big Boss, for example, but I don't know who Big Boss is. I just know that Liquid Snake and Solid Snake were cloned from him, and there were 6 other clones, but they took those ones out or whatever. All in all, like I said, the theme of Metal Gear Solid is about not being a slave to your heritage or your genetics. You have to live yourself for what you want to be, and you have to look to the future. Snake's gonna die, and Naomi says you should just live. She's not interested in her past either. She's looking to her future. In the Meryl ending, Snake and Meryl can look to what time they have left together. In the Otacon ending, he's a changed man. He's moving to the field of psychology because he's no longer afraid of people. I'm glad I played Metal Gear. I'm looking forward to playing the rest of the games in the series at some point during Slaying the Backlog, but I don't know what we're going to play next, so this is where you come in. Please like and subscribe to the video, and also comment, what game should I play next? I'm going to run a list either here or I ran it earlier in this edit that has all the games I haven't played, or a lot of the games I haven't played. Tell me what you think I should play next. And as always, be excellent to each other.